What boundaries do is they prohibit you from dropping to someone else's vibrational energy. So let's say someone, cuts you off or cuts in front of you in line or is rude. If you watch yourself and you're not curious with what you're doing with your own energy, you will probably drop down to theirs, where you will now be angry and cruel and mean and frustrated. Personally, I lived a lot of my life in more lower vibrational energies. I just don't have any desire to do that. So with boundaries, I just kind of go, okay, like I'm operating up here and you're coming at me down here. If I don't have any boundaries, I'm going to drop down to where you're vibrating, and that's where I'm going to meet you. If I have boundaries, I go, hey, yeah, I'm not going down there. So if you want to interact with me, you can come on up. And if not, then no thanks. Welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here, we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it. And let's do it together. Hi, and welcome back to Grow with Robin Breckenridge. In our last episode, we explored the sacred and trust categories of the boundary pyramid, those relationships that are closest to us, the people that we turn to for emotional safety, deep connection, and shared vulnerability. And that's where we often feel seen, met, and supported. But what about everyone else? Today, we're stepping into the category where most of your relationships will live, the shared interest category. And I want to say this clearly. This is the most commonly used category on the boundary pyramid. It's where things can get confusing when we are putting people into categories, because you might have maybe someone that you love deeply, like your mom, for instance, but you can't really share a lot of vulnerability with her. And you also might have a coworker here, someone you find rude or draining, but you still have to interact with this person each day at work. You might even find that your romantic partner is in this category. If the relationship lacks emotional safety, mutual support, or trust. And that can definitely be a painful realization, but it's important. Remember, we are not locking anyone into these categories. You can move people in these categories, but we need to get a baseline and understand where we currently are. It is not uncommon to find your spouse or your significant other in the shared interest category. Just know that this is an alert or an invitation that we can work on some closeness or some repair in that relationship. Or it also might be that this relationship might not necessarily be the healthiest for you, but we don't need to know that right now. Okay. First, we're just going to go through this pyramid and kind of see where people land from a place of truth and reality. Because being in relationship doesn't automatically mean emotional closeness. So what can be confusing is maybe we have our mom in here who we love. We have a coworker we don't like. We have our significant other, and they all go into the same category, which is why when I first started talking about the boundary pyramid, I mentioned that it's not about how much you love someone, that the placement is based on emotional safety. And that's what can make this category a little tricky and why it's so necessary to understand. So this episode is here to make this easier for you, to give you language, clarity, and peace around how to navigate the middle ground between closeness and distance. And it's where most of life actually happens. And if you're someone who struggles with How much do I give in a relationship? Or what am I supposed to expect or allowed to expect? Why does this relationship feel so confusing? This episode is definitely for you. And if you need to listen to it more than once, that's okay too. So let's start breaking it down. The shared interest category sits between intimacy and distance. It's not about deep trust or emotional vulnerability like the sacred and trust category, but it's not about distance or disconnection either. Someone is in this category because you share something. That might be a job. It might be that you're in the same family. You have a history. You have the same neighborhood, a mutual friend, a shared hobby or community. Maybe your children are friends. Maybe your kids are on the same sports team. Even someone who is a business partner or in the same social circle as you. So let me give you some real life examples of people who might live in this category for you. Your coworker or boss, a business partner or team member, a neighbor, a fellow parent in your kid's class, your in-laws, a sibling with who you don't necessarily confide in. Maybe your ex that you share children with. Maybe your ex's new partner who is a part of your co-parenting environment. Your parents, if that relationship doesn't necessarily have emotional safety, which is not abnormal. A childhood friend who drifts in and out. Your hairstylist, your yoga teacher, your barista, your romantic partner, if the emotional safety or mutual trust is not intact. But the point is, this category is wide. And because of that, you need tools to be able to navigate it well. And it's not about how much you love someone. Remember, it's about how safe it is to be emotionally vulnerable with them. And what the shared interest is that keeps you connected in the relationship. So here are 9 principles that will help you hold this category with clarity and integrity. 1, we're going to keep the relationship relational by keeping it light. Relational means that we have the ability to pause and consider how our behavior impacts ourselves and other people. So when in doubt, stay grounded in the reason you're connected, which is your shared interest. If the connection is work, stay in the lane of work. If it's co-parenting, the children are the shared interest. Keep the conversations and interactions about the child. If it's history, you can connect with nostalgia without diving into current day vulnerability. So that means keeping it light, not cold, just clear. So here's an example. If someone in this category asks you, oh my gosh, I heard you're getting divorced. How are you doing? You don't need to go into the weeds. You don't need to tell them all the details. You can high level the truth. And it might sound something like this. Hey, I'm definitely grieving, but I'm hanging in there. Thanks so much for asking. Anyways, about that, ... Okay, so you're not making it super awkward, like, I don't want to talk about this. You can just very much high level your answer. And of course, if you want to verbalize that that's something that you don't feel comfortable talking about, you can do that too. But when we high level a truth, we just don't give all of the details because this person hasn't earned that level of access to us. Or maybe it's not the appropriate question or not the appropriate place. So it's not cold. That's protecting your emotional space. So number 2, you trust someone or you don't. And I know that I've mentioned this on previous episodes, but there is no kinda trust category on the boundary pyramid. Trust is earned. And remember, my favorite definition of trust is data over time. If someone hasn't shown you that they're emotionally safe, they don't belong in a closer category. You don't have to overextend vulnerability hoping that they'll meet you there. We are simply going off of the data that we have collected on this person. And keep in mind, if you kind of trust someone, because listen, that's a real thing. I just think that it's better to err on the side of caution put that person in shared interest. And of course, we're not going out telling them, or we're not like demoting anyone. We're just telling ourselves the truth. So it's totally okay to say, well, I mean, I trust them in some ways, but like, you know, when it really goes down, I'm not sure that they could hold my information safely, or that they wouldn't repeat what I told them, or that they wouldn't turn it around and use it against me or judge me. Then what I would say is just have more boundaries in that relationship and get more data over time. Or, of course, having a hard conversation and asking for what you need is always available if you feel like that person has the capacity to have that type of conversation with you. So it is okay to say, you know, I really love our relationship. I'd love to be closer, but there's a couple things about the relationship that don't feel safe. Like a lot of times I've noticed that you've given me, you know, unsolicited advice or feedback, and it feels, you know, it makes me feel kind of small. And I'd much prefer if you could just hold space for me, and I'll ask when I want your opinion or feedback. Sometimes it's just little conversations like that. And sometimes we bring that to people and their response is shaming or blaming. And in that case, what that person is telling you is, I don't have the emotional maturity for what you're asking me. Number 3, you don't have emotional expectations of people that you don't trust. So you may want them to be more kind, respectful, consistent, or open. But if they haven't shown you that, if you don't have any of that data over time, believing they'll change is just a setup for your own disappointment. That's an emotional expectation that doesn't align with the data. I told a story when I introduced the boundary pyramid about a friend that I had that would very often, you know, cancel plans with me close to the time that we were supposed to meet. And of course, there was no right or wrong way to handle this. But because I used the pyramid and because I was able to get curious with what expectations I had on that person, I was able to see that what was causing me the most suffering was that I had unrealistic expectations of that friend. I was expecting that friend to be more consistent, and have their words and actions align. And that was not the data that I had on that person. That was not the consistent data. So when I was able to get curious with that, I was able to choose versus react. And that is one of the most amazing things about this pyramid and about all of the work that I'm bringing to you in this podcast and that I do with my clients, is that it is limiting the amount of times that we feel like we are a victim to people and relationships in our life, so that we can be more empowered. And part of being more empowered is having the option of choosing. Okay. And I think that that's what this pyramid does. So it doesn't mean that, you know, we just can't have expectations of the people in our life. Like, please, in that trust category, in that sacred category, we can have expectations. But if we have expectations of people in the shared interest, a lot of times we are going to be let down. Number 4, and this is probably one of my favorite ones because it's helped me out so much in my life, but people in the shared interest category, their feedback doesn't belong to you. So that means if someone in this category judges you, criticizes you, or offers unsolicited opinions, pause and ask yourself, do they have access to the full truth of my life? Because think about it. If they're in shared interest, we have boundaries. We are not giving them full access to who we are, how we feel, what we think, the context behind our decisions. So that means that you can contemplate that if somebody gives you feedback in this category, do they really know you? Do they really have all of the information on you or the situation in which they're judging you? So a lot of times when it's happened to me, I think about it and I go, oh yeah, I didn't tell them everything, or they don't know the reasoning why because I've never fully opened up to them about myself or why. And then I can kind of like not wear their judgment and criticism around for the day. I can just kind of drop that ball. So the people in this category, they don't have full access to the truth of your life. So their opinion isn't rooted in understanding, and you don't need to internalize it. Number 5, you don't owe them anything and they don't owe you anything. Now that can sound so cold and so rigid, but let me add the caveat. You always owe it to yourself to stay in your integrity. You don't owe people in the shared interests the full story. You don't owe them your time. You don't owe them your energy or your vulnerability, but you do owe yourself aligned behavior, like speaking to people with respect, communicating, protecting your peace, walking away when it's unkind, choosing how you show up even when they don't. So I have the silliest story, but it was a really great situation in where I was able to kind of get curious and tune into my values. But one time I was leaving the grocery store and I saw a lady, an older lady in like a motorized wheelchair scooter, and she was taking her groceries to her car. And I really wanted to be helpful and help her, but then I didn't want to override her independence, and maybe she didn't want the help. And so I got in my car and I went to start it, and it just, something didn't feel aligned. And, I knew that she was about to get out of the scooter to put her groceries away. And so I sat with myself and I thought, well, why do I not want to, like, why would I not help her? Why would I not offer? And what I thought was like, what if she rejects me in front of these parking lot full of people? Like, how dare you? I can get my own, put my own groceries in my car or whatever. And in that moment, I said, but who are you, Robin? And the voice said back to me, I'm kind. And I went, okay, well, just go be kind then. And so I went up to the lady and I said, I hope you don't mind, but I'd love to help you put your groceries in your car. And she was so appreciative. She almost had tears in her eyes and said, thank you so much. You're an angel. I wasn't sure how I was going to get those in the car. Now, of course, she could have said no thanks, and she could have been offended, and she could have been rude. But either way, I was going to be who I am in my core. And so there's times, trust me, where like I get angry at people, or I feel like they've slighted me. What's the most amazing thing about boundaries is that we're all operating at different levels of consciousness and awareness. And that's not hierarchy. It's just facts, right? And we can vary day to day or hour to hour where our level of consciousness is. What boundaries do is they prohibit you from dropping to someone else's vibrational energy. So let's say someone, cuts you off or cuts in front of you in line or is rude. If you watch yourself and you're not curious with what you're doing with your own energy, you will probably drop down to theirs, where you will now be angry and cruel and mean and frustrated. Personally, I lived a lot of my life in more lower vibrational energies. I just don't have any desire to do that. So with boundaries, I just kind of go, okay, like I'm operating up here and you're coming at me down here. If I don't have any boundaries, I'm going to drop down to where you're vibrating, and that's where I'm going to meet you. If I have boundaries, I go, hey, yeah, I'm not going down there. So if you want to interact with me, you can come on up. And if not, then no thanks. So that silly story about the grocery store parking lot just kind of like serves as an example that like, even when you are rude to me, or you're someone in the shared interest category that I don't think I, owe you the world, I'm still going to be kind. I'm still going to have empathy and compassion to the best of my ability. So remember that just because you don't owe someone something, I always tell people, like, listen, I made an agreement with myself a long time ago. Nobody gets to take me out of my integrity. There is no person, there is no reason that is good enough for me to do that ever again in my life. So number 6, grieving the difference. Sometimes the hardest part of the shared interest category is what we wish it could be. Maybe you wanted your mom in the trust category, but it's just not emotionally safe. Maybe you had a best friend you had to move to shared interest after a betrayal. Maybe you're in a relationship where you've realized your partner is more suited in the shared interest category, and you have to grieve the dream of the emotional intimacy you had hoped for. It's okay to grieve that. Grief is a part of boundaries. Grief means I'm letting go of something important to me. Now, that could be a relationship. That could be the dream that you had for a relationship. It could be that you're grieving who you used to be in the relationship. But grief is definitely a part of boundaries. And clarity doesn't mean that you stop loving someone. It means that you stop trying to get a kind of love or safety that they don't have the capacity to give you. Number 7, understanding healthy power dynamics. I cannot talk about the shared interest category without talking about power dynamics, especially in professional roles. Let me use myself as an example. In coaching, I am a part of an ethical power dynamic. People come to me for help and to better themselves. So that means that I can be in a client's trust category for them, but they cannot be in the trust category for me. They would have to be in the shared interest category. And what is the shared interest? This work. They hired me to help them. Now, the reason they can't be in mine is because they came to me to focus on themselves. This work is actually not about me. So that's why even when people go, oh, I don't want to text you in between sessions because I don't want to bother you. And I always say, oh, hey, listen, let's make an agreement here. I've done a lot of work on myself. I can take care of me. You don't have to take care of me. You take care of you. You ask for what you need. So if after sessions with clients, I called them up with my own problems, now there is not appropriate boundaries within the relationship to protect the initial dynamic in the relationship, which is one of us needs help and one of us is in a mentor coaching position. So that means that, again, I can be in a client's trust category because I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to be non-judgmental. My words and actions are going to align. I'm going to be safe and trustworthy, but they are going to be in my shared interest. And that's not because I don't care. I truly develop beautifully deep relationships with my clients. It's because the dynamic has boundaries for a reason. If I leaned on my clients for support or vented about my personal life, it would create emotional harm. There would be a role reversal, and that's not safe. The same is true for teacher-student relationships, therapist-client, coach-client, parent-child, boss-employee. Clarity and boundaries around power keeps everyone safe. Now, the reason why I specifically talk about professional relationships when we're talking about power dynamics is because, let me tell you, when we add several lanes into a relationship, like you're my best friend and you're also my boss, or you're my friend and my boss, I will tell you those things are doable. I'm sure there's people that work with each other that can maintain a professional relationship and a personal relationship. However, it's very complex. And it takes two people that have a lot of consciousness on board. So just to keep things simple and clear, which clear is kind, I think that sometimes it's nice to just kind of pick one lane in a relationship. And especially if someone is your boss or your employee, again, that's working around ethical power dynamics. And when power dynamics don't have ethics and when they don't have consciousness, they can hurt people. I think that probably everyone listening to this podcast, whether you know it or not, has been negatively impacted by power dynamics that did not have appropriate safety and boundaries in them. So that's a really great segue to the next principle, which is children belong in the shared interest category, not trust or sacred. I know that this one's hard, but it's really important. When I first did something similar to this process, I heard the word unconditional. And at the time, my son was little. And I thought, oh, that's it. My son is going in the sacred category because I unconditionally love him. And then the more I learned it, I screeched my brakes because very similar to the example that I gave you about me being able to be in the trust category for a client, but them not being able to be in the trust category for me, and that is a safer place to put them in shared interest, the same thing applies for kids. You can be in your child's trust category. You can be safe, consistent, clear, kind, all the things that someone would need in order for you to trust them. But your child cannot be in your trust category for you. Why? Because the trust category is a reciprocal category, and children cannot consent to emotionally support a parent. They cannot hold space for your secrets or be your confidant and it be healthy. That creates something called enmeshment. Enmeshment means that there are not appropriate boundaries between you and your child, your emotions and your child, the responsibility. Here's the deal when it comes to parenting. For our kids, they don't owe us support. They don't owe it to us to be a place that we process things that go on in our life. They are simply developing who they are. That's it. So when you have adult children and they can consent to having a reciprocal relationship, which in the trust category, they know almost everything about you. I don't think it's safe when our kids are focusing on developing who they are to know too much information about us or feel that they are emotionally or physically responsible for us. So let your child be the center of their own story, not a supporting character in yours. I know that sometimes this can feel cold. Again, it's not about how much you love someone. I love my son more than anything in the world, and the safest place for him to be while he is developing himself is in my shared interest category. And again, I can be safe and trustworthy for him and be in that trust category for him. He cannot be that for me. Now, the last principle has to do with dating. Dating starts here in the shared interest category. When you start dating someone, this is where they go. Not trust, definitely not sacred, because you're gathering information. And what is the shared interest when you're dating? You guys are both looking to find a partner. So you are collecting data and you're observing. Do their words and actions align? Can they hold accountability and repair? Are they emotionally safe? Are they emotionally available? Until you know the answers to those questions, keep your boundaries in place. Now, I have heard all kinds of dating stories over the last decade of doing this. I've heard stories where someone comes in on a Monday and says, oh my gosh, Robin, I met the one, I met the love of my life at the club. We talked all night. We have the same childhood trauma. And that's where I really like that definition of trust is data over time. You might have had a deeply connected conversation, but you don't have enough data to determine whether you trust someone or you don't. That takes a little bit of time. And I'm sure we've all heard that around the 6 month mark, 6 to 9 month mark is when, people's true colors really come out. I think to take that even a step further, I think it's where we start to get activated in the relationship and our patterning starts to come up and the way we manage our feelings starts to come up and our baggage from our childhood or from previous relationships. So when I have people come, to talk to me and they say, oh my gosh, this is it. I met the one. I'll say, okay, did you see him activated yet? Because we don't really know. We don't really know if someone's compatible for us until we see them activated. And that usually takes a little bit of time. We got to let some of those hormones settle down when we first meet somebody. So the safest thing for you to do is realize that when you're dating someone, you are just expanding your shared interest category. You are vetting out whether this person will stay in shared interest, maybe move towards the trust category, or maybe they're going to go down the pyramid because you're not interested to continue dating them. So if you keep your boundaries in place while you're dating someone, you pump the brakes and you get some data, then you can use that beautiful word called discernment. I've had a lot of people tell me like, oh my gosh, the universe is so mad at me. I'm never going to find a partner. It's never going to be for me. And we feel very victimized by like the gods or the universe or dating in general. And typically what needs some TLC is our discernment and the partners that we're choosing. A lot of times we're choosing the same person, the same partner, the same variation of a parent that wounded us. And it's really our discernment that's kicking our butt. So this is one way to be discerning. Keep them in shared interest, get data over time, and then discern where they go in the categories after that. In the last episode, we went over the sacred and trust category, and I gave you guys an invitation to write out the characteristics that someone would need to have in order for you to feel unconditionally loved and safe, which would be the sacred category, or what characteristics someone would need to have in order for you to trust them. Now, as we're going down the boundary pyramid, the categories as we go down, people are becoming less and less emotionally safe, or we have less of an interest in having a deeper connection with these people. And remember that little principle that I said earlier? If you don't trust someone, you can't have emotional expectations of them, right? So in that shared interest category, this relationship is not rooted in trust. We have a shared interest, but it's not rooted in trust, which means that if we have expectations in this category, it's going to hurt us. Because this category isn't based on who someone is, it's based on what you share. You might want everyone in this category to be respectful, and that would be lovely. But if Sally from accounting down the hall is rude and the shared interest is work, and you don't need her to be respectful in order to get your job done, then it doesn't mean you tolerate abuse or mistreatment. It means you hold standards for yourself, not expectations for others who haven't earned them. So that means that you could walk away from disrespect, decline invitations that feel draining, use internal boundaries, not overfunctioning in the relationship, not trying to change someone into someone they're not, or their capacity into a capacity they don't have. This is where boundaries become self-leadership. So if this category stirred something in you, let me tell you, totally normal. It is normal to feel grief, frustration, or even confusion as you reassign your relationships. It's also normal to feel peace and relief when things finally click. The shared interest category is where we get clear without being cold, where we stay grounded in who we are, even if the people around us don't rise up to meet us. It's where integrity lives and freedom lives too. So this week, I invite you to list the people who you think might belong in the shared interest category. And just to be clear, write down the shared interest that connects you. That might be family, friends, work, yoga, etc. Practice lightness and internal boundaries in that relationship if you can. Like my next few episodes are going to be about how do we communicate boundaries? How do we create a roadmap? Like what are the next steps? Because I'm fully aware that just teaching you guys the system and being like, cool, now go have great boundaries. No. We need more help and support than that. Okay. These first few episodes on the boundary pyramid are just to start getting you thinking and to build your awareness of how emotionally safe you feel in your relationships. So remember, it's okay to love someone and still keep the relationship light. I know there was a time in my life where I didn't have anyone in the trust category when I first did this piece of work that was similar. And I remember thinking, cool, like my life already sucks. And now all these people I thought I trusted, I don't. There were two reasons why that was true. One, I was trusting the wrong people. And I really never thought, what do I need characteristic wise in order to trust somebody? The other is that I wasn't opening myself up. Vulnerability was way too scary. So I wasn't really letting anyone in that trust category. I felt a lot more comfortable being there for you and not disclosing things about my life, which meant ultimately that I really wasn't being seen in my relationships. So it's not about blame whatsoever, but know that there's a lot of complexity as to why people go in different categories. Sometimes it's like, wow, I realized I'm being really rigid and I'm not letting anyone in, or my fear of rejection is kind of overpowering letting anybody be able to witness me or have access to my vulnerability. Or maybe we go, God dang, I have been trusting the wrong people. And no wonder I think no one's trustworthy. Okay. Back to that little piece around discernment. Like that's what we're here to do. Ultimately, all of this work kind of starts with us looking at the relationships outside of us. It always comes back to the relationship that we have with ourselves. So it's okay to wish that maybe people were closer and be able to accept that they're not. Remember, it's not cold to have boundaries. It's kind to you and to the people that you're in relationship with. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about the cordial and no contact categories. And this is where distance is either chosen or necessary. And I will walk you through how to navigate these relationships with dignity, self-respect, and peace. Until then, take good care of your energy, your heart, and your emotional clarity. You, my friend, are doing some sacred work, and I'm really proud of you. So hang in there. We got one more episode on the boundary pyramid, and then we're going to talk more about like how do we put this system into practice in our lives. And because I've been doing it for 10 years and I've been teaching it, I think I got this thing down. So let's do it. I'll see you next week. Take care. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this work. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come connect with me over on TikTok at Robin Breckenridge or Instagram at Coach with Robin, where I share even more insights, tools, and conversations around boundaries, self-trust, relational healing, and so much more. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and personal growth purposes only. The insights and tools I share are based on my experience as a life and relationship coach and are meant for general guidance. Each person's story is unique, and the nuances of individual experiences can't always be addressed in this format. What's shared here may not be applicable to every situation, especially those involving abuse, oppression, severe mental illness, or systematic harm. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek support from a qualified mental health professional or emergency resources. Thank you for listening and for showing up for yourself in this way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.